DDA May monthly meeting is now beginning. Could I have a roll call, please?
All right. Gary Bourne.
Here.
Newman Clark. Here. Russ Collins. Kunzel.
Here.
Lee Gunn.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Heacha.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein.
Here.
John Miller.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Sam Smith.
Here.
John Split. You have one.
Thank you. Russ Collins has jury duty in Detroit today in federal court, which is why he's not here. We had two people who had jury duty today. Keith got off. Evidently, Russ has not been so lucky. And John Split should be here. He had to be called away on a technical emergency over his business, and so hopefully he will be back. We first have audience participation.
Joe, can I just start with a point of order?
Oh, yes.
Could I just verify that this meeting was properly noticed?
Yes. This was sent over to the city and was posted at City Hall, on Legistar, and here at the DDA office.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. So, audience participation, if anyone would like to address us for a 4-minute period, is there anyone who would like to address the meeting? I don't see anyone. So we'll go on to reports from city boards and commissions. And was Ray Detter unable to be here? Is that correct? Okay, so our usual report on the Citizens Task Force will not be today. We have the committee to discuss a mutually beneficial agreement with the city, and we are going to move that discussion until we get to our subcommittee reports. So next we need approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Minutes have been approved in second. Any changes to the minutes or additions? All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The minutes are approved. So now we will get to our subcommittee reports. The first is going to be our Bricks and Money Committee from Roger Hewitt. And Roger, I will let you dive right in with we have a new development that will somewhat change our discussion today.
Probably dramatically changed our discussion today.
Yes.
We're going to bring a new parking contract to the board today for ratification. There has been, as we reported, a lot of discussion both at City Council and with the DDA about this contract. There has been a lot of back and forth on particularly the financial issues. We were ready to bring a resolution today to the board, which I'm not going to bring at this time, because this morning we got a communication from the city concerning our TIF revenue that we are uncertain about what the implications of that are, but there are certainly going to be financial implications to our TIF.
And this is based, is it not, on an interpretation of the enabling ordinance for the DDA?
We received this this is part of the ordinance that enabled the DDA back in 1992.
Which you cite that it started chapter 7.
82.
82. Did I say? I said 1982, section 1:156. Powers of the authority.
It's of chapter 7.
Of chapter 7, right. I'm not very good at and number 2 on that, considering tax increment financing, that the captured assessed valuation derived from new construction and increased value of property, newly constructed or existing property, and improved subsequent thereto, grows at a rate faster than the anticipated tax increment plan. At least 50% of such additional amount shall be divided among the taxing units in relationship to their proportion of the current tax levies. This did not come into play at all in the initial part of the DDA up until 2002. By our numbers, it does come into play since 2002 when the DDA was reauthorized, because we put a new set of projections on TIF revenue in at that point. Joe and the city have been crunching numbers furiously all morning, and there is there is uncertainty of exactly what that financial impact will be. The language is not particularly clear. It's open to some interpretations on whether it's real or real and personal, about whether it is cumulative or not cumulative. So at this point, we are completely uncertain about what impact this will have on our budget and our 10-year plan going forward. But it will be significant, whatever it is. Therefore, I think it is imprudent for us to potentially approve a new parking contract with a financial commitment until out of the parking fund, until we have a clear idea of what impact this will have on our TIF fund. I think as certainly the board members are aware, and the public should be aware, that the parking fund pays for itself and its maintenance. The new underground structure is in the initial years being partially, the bond is being partially paid from TIF revenue, so that's an obligation for the parking system, parking construction from TIF. There are also a number of other bonds sidewalk improvement bonds that are being paid out of the TIF. So it will have a significant impact. We have no idea how big that is right now, but I don't think we can move forward on any financial commitments until we're clear that what that is.
And this was received at what time this morning?
Joe gave me a rather concerned call about 9:30 this morning.
9:30 this morning, and the city knew that we had a parking contract in front of us.
I'm sure they did. Yes, it's on the agenda tonight.
My question is, when we have an initial construction, that money goes into our TIF. Any value above and beyond that initial construction is returned to the participating
Correct.
governments.
Correct.
Does that count as part of this estimation of TIF? Because we have always deliberately estimated our TIF in a conservative manner so that we would not get caught.
I think that's
Another question to throw in.
Yeah, that is indeed another question. We're looking at the increase every year. And again, the language here is not very clear in the legislation, and I think we need to sit down with the city and come to a clear understanding of exactly what this means and clear agreement on it and what those financial implications are. And it's too early to be able to do that at this point.
Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we became aware of this very, very late in the day on Fridays when I became aware of it. Then we had a city attorney, assistant city attorney, kind of burning the midnight oil over the weekend to try to come up with an interpretation, because it's interesting that it's been sitting there for quite some time in Chapter 7 and hasn't been addressed. And we wanted to see if it had been addressed at some time, because we sort of thought that it must have been. And then of course, Tom called Joe as early as he could this morning, and I called Joan, because we wanted to make sure that the DDA knew about this, and we figured this out before any action went forward. But I don't know. It's hard to say right now. The language is, I thought, I don't know who crafted it, but it seemed like it could have been a whole lot more clear at the time. But
We can blame people from 1981.
Yes, 1981.
either that, or we're just kind of we're slow that we can't figure it out. Maybe they were very smart. But I think it is prudent to step back and take a look at it and to postpone any action on this for some time until we've all had a chance to sit down and figure it out.
How does this affect our standing resolution relative to the $2 million that we paid for past year? Don't we have a deadline creeping up in terms of executing a contract on that resolution? No later than what date? Isn't that coming up pretty quick? Are we going to have to amend that if this isn't resolved by then?
Well, I think our other resolution said that we would probably have a contract by October 31st of last year.
But no later than the end of the financial year, right? And I mean, everyone needs to settle their budget, obviously, but independent of figuring out what the calculation is moving forward, all of the implications relative to any refunds, all of the implications relative to any reserves that we may need to have for pending state tax tribunal issues, we have new construction right now going into foreclosure, being resold at half of its appraised value. Those will start coming down the pipe, and that might take some time. I hope we give it diligence, but I also understand that we've got layoffs and budgets and all this other stuff, and I don't want to get on the wrong side of our original resolution because there were legal implications to our original resolution to extend $2 million outside of the contract.
I don't know. I'll have to look at the terms of that,
Okay.
that resolution.
Can we get a copy of that?
We'll get a copy of that from.
Should we do that prior to the end of this meeting? We need to make some changes to it. Either amend it or abide by it or something different.
Well, yeah, I guess we'll have to look at it. Amber, if you could maybe get us copies of that so that we can just see if there is anything that we have to do right now.
And Newcomb, you're referring to the resolution of approximately a year ago, granting the city an extra $2 million in this current fiscal year.
Correct.
Under that parking contract.
Right.
Yeah,
Gary.
we have a ton of questions, and rather than trying to even collect them all, let alone answer
Yeah.
them, what do we think our process should be right now to dive into this? Are we going to reconvene mutually beneficial, meet on Wednesday, or what do we want to do?
Good question. We've had a little over 2.5 hours to try and come up with.
I think that temporarily I would like to entertain, if someone would be willing to make it, a motion to table this resolution that's on our agenda.
We should actually just procedurally, you should move it.
But you even have to table it if it's not been moved.
No, if it's not been moved, then it just disappears.
Then it just
goes away.
disappears.
So we don't have to do
So
anything.
maybe we just don't, if it hasn't been moved, so in that case, we don't need to table it. Thank you.
And I would just suggest that before even the mutually beneficial committee meets, we perhaps put the legal staff and accounting staff together in the same room and work on the interpretation of what I know a couple of people have had a hard time getting their minds around the language. And these are skilled people who are looking at it. So.
Well, that definitely, I think it's going to be a considerable amount of time before that all gets worked out. And I, for one, would also think that once they figure out what the legal language means, that there would have to be some sort of independent audit, or an independent auditor would figure it out, because I think the calculations could differ.
One difficulty with our legal counsel is that he will not be available starting tomorrow. So
Right.
there are 3 very skilled attorneys on this board, and I would hope that one or all of you would be part of this process.
We will be. I did speak to Jerry Lax, our legal counsel, this morning, just to get some sort of preliminary, at least formulating what our questions should be. And he should be available by the beginning of next week.
And how does this affect our other partners in the TIF capture?
Of the TIF capture, very roughly, Joe can probably give a more accurate number, but very roughly 60% of our TIF goes to the city, and approximately 40% goes to 3 other taxing authorities: the community college, the library, and the county.
But Sandy's point's well taken. We ought to disclose to them so they can have their legal counsel look at it, because we may come up with an interpretation that they disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we will get that correspondence out to them. I think that's a good point.
Okay, so we don't need to table, since we have not moved the resolution on the parking contract, we don't need to table it. More than likely, given the city's budget schedule, we will probably have to have a special meeting sometime in May, assuming we can get this all cleared up in the next few weeks.
Well, we'll have to see
Yeah.
what's necessary. I think, given that there are so many unknowns there, we have to just say we are going to resolve these issues as quickly as possible. And meanwhile, move on to the other parts of our agenda, which include your report about the third quarter financials and parking revenues. Is there, unless there's any more discussion?
Yeah, just briefly, I just want to thank Roger and Gary and Russ, even though he's not here, with the tremendous amount of work that has gone into crafting this this agreement that we've got this far, only for it not to go any further. And I appreciate you guys as volunteers. I don't think a lot of people realize that this is a volunteer board, and there are things that you could be doing with your time other than showing up at 7:30 on Monday mornings, or making special or additional times for meetings in your life. So I just want to point out that the city thanks you wholeheartedly for the time that you put in to get us this far.
And we do have a rather detailed, rather well-negotiated parking contract with obviously some financial details that still need to be re-examined.
So your work is not done, but we thank you.
And
Thank you, sir.
I should also mention that we have an existing parking contract, so we're not operating in a position where we don't have an agreement in place.
Assuming we're not afield of our resolution.
Correct.
I would just think it might be more proper to actually, since this amendment occurs on our, this resolution occurs on our agenda, to move the resolution and then have perhaps a movement to table.
I'm certainly willing to do that. I don't know how much it follows, like on the city council, when it appears on the city council agenda, you certainly have to do that because the agenda has been voted on in a certain way. But
It may not hold true here.
But
we don't have an approval of the agenda.
It doesn't hurt.
But it doesn't
And I would
hurt.
move approval of the resolution.
Support.
Okay.
All in favor? I'm sorry.
No, no, oh, I moved to table
I
it.
mean, yeah, discussion. Sorry about
He
that.
moved it,
I moved to table it.
and it was it was moved by Bob and seconded by who?
Me.
Okay.
He's
Let's
going
get
to
that straight.
table.
Moved by Bob, seconded by Lee. Moved to
Here,
second by,
moves to
and I
table.
will second the
Second.
move to table.
Okay,
All right.
now,
No
a
discussion.
vote on the tabling of the resolution. Or first, is there any discussion on tabling the resolution? Okay,
Shall
so
we
a
do a
vote.
roll call?
We certainly can.
I think we should.
All right?
Joe?
Joe, could you read the roll call, please?
On tabling.
On tabling the resolution.
Gary Bourne,
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Come on, here.
Bob Gunsel,
Yes.
Let me get this.
Lee Gunn,
Yes.
Roger Hewitt,
Yes.
John Heaton,
Yes.
Joan Lowenstein,
Yes.
John Mowat,
Yes.
Keith Orr,
Yes.
Sandy Smith,
Yes.
John Split.
Yes.
All right,
Okay,
the resolution
that's
is
all official.
tabled. Meanwhile, we have been given our resolution that we approved, I don't know what the,
May
oh,
5th.
May 5th.
May 5th, interestingly, almost exactly a year ago, to provide the city with $2 million. So we can be kind of looking at that as Roger gives the rest of his report on the third quarter financials and the parking revenues.
Okay. If you will turn to, I believe it is page 11 in the packet, our financials for the third quarter. Although, in light of the previous discussion, we don't, uncertain how valid these will be going forward, but TIF income is down about a little under 6% below our anticipated TIF income. We still are expecting a little bit to trickle in between now and the end of the year, although the vast majority of it is in, but it does look like overall TIF revenue is going to be down in the 5 to 6% range over what was budgeted. Capital improvements are down significantly because of a reimbursement both from the state for our 5th and Division sidewalk improvements.
Sorry, Russ is texting, would like to know if he should call in. Can I tell him not necessary?
Yeah.
That's him.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it, okay.
Okay.
Trying to get it. We can tell.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
No problem. So,
Lunch break.
That, and we were the bond for the Fifth Division project will also reimburse some of our capital expenditures. This is again the part where we have paid cash up front and then are reimbursed after the sale of the bond for some of those expenses, as well as the nearly $1 million we got in a state grant for the Fifth Division project. So our anticipated capital expenditures are a small fraction of what we had initially budgeted for this fiscal year. So overall in TIF, we anticipate being about $550,000 positive, which is about a $2 million turnaround over what was budgeted, again, because of the timing of the bond reimbursements and the state grant coming through. Moving on to parking. Total parking revenue is also off about a little under 6% from budgeted amount. It is up overall over the previous year, but about 6% below budgeted. Overall increases, as we'll look when we get into parking, are probably about 3%. Our parking increases were approximately, for revenue, parking increased rates is about 6%. So there is a small drop off in usage in the system. Not a significant amount, but it is not expanding at the moment.
Roger,
yes.
also our rate increases were delayed.
Yes,
We
thank
have
you.
to keep remembering.
Yeah, the budget, that I should correct that. That is correct. That we had budgeted the parking rate increases to start in July 1st of last year, and we decided to delay them until September 1st. So that is actually, you're right, that's a chunk of the difference of on income. Operating expenses are about close to where we expected. They're about 5% above what we had anticipated. Direct parking expenses are very close, slightly under. So net expenses are very close to what we anticipated when we budgeted, with less than 2% off of on our net expenses, despite that delay in instituting parking rates. Parking maintenance fund, again, we have traditionally transferred a little over $2 million from the parking fund into the parking maintenance fund. We had budgeted about $2 million in parking maintenance. We actually are anticipating spending significantly less than that. This is the result of having Carl Walker, our parking engineers, do another thorough examination of the system and come up with a recommendation on parking maintenance, with an eye of delaying anything that did not in any way affect the structural integrity of the system and the structures, to see if those could be delayed. These are things like painting and so forth. So we are anticipating spending only about $600,000 instead of the $2.6 million. However, we still did transfer the money into the parking maintenance fund, so the money is still there. We are just delaying spending it. And housing income is down a little bit. These are almost entirely due to very low interest rates that we're receiving on our fund balances right now. As a public entity, we are very restricted on how we can invest our money, and the current money markets leave almost no return on interest on those accounts. And we are right where we expected on operating expenses, which essentially are budgeted amounts, and those would be grants to various housing authorities. And Joe and I would be glad to answer any questions. On the next page, we have a graphic version of this.
So Roger, on the TIF income,
Mm-hmm.
the budget amount, the budget amount 3.9, and that's based on the historical but conservative average of 2% gain a year.
Believe so. Joe, when we do that's based on our 2% since we do not really have numbers to base it on when we do our budget.
Except in this year, it was based upon increases for two buildings, which was Aragon and 411.
Lofts.
411 lofts were the increases we took.
Okay.
But with the overall loss of the commercial value downtown, that was offset. So we're still, that's what creates the shortfall there.
We were very close to budget on the preliminary numbers we've been given by the city.
But again, we do not have any, we're making this budget, this budget was made, 15 months or so ago.
Right.
And we are literally guessing on where we think the TIF will come in based on what information we can get from the city.
And remind me for the budget coming up, what we projected that to go up or down?
We projected an increase based upon those two projects, the second half of those two projects.
And I think the numbers that I think I have seen recently are actually down again about 2%. So we
In
want to watch
commercial?
that. Actually in the valuation of the overall district.
Our budgeted for 2011-12 is about 3.9, according to our enacted budget. And as you see, we're at about 3.7 or so this year.
So it'd probably be very similar.
Good guess. But, again, we don't have any numbers until the city actually tells us what those are. Okay. The graphic.
Yeah, Mayor, did you have a question?
I was looking at page 23, the parking for March. And I was just curious if somebody can explain why there was such a jump.
In revenues?
In our hourly patrons.
Hourly patrons. Hourly patrons is kind of a slippery number because it's the number of vehicles that do not have monthly parking passes that go into the structures and the surface lots. It is not a function of how long they stay there. So that number tends to jump around a lot. A lot of people that go in for a short period of time may not generate as much revenue as less people going in and staying a longer period of time.
So patrons jumped by 28.73% and revenues only jumped by 7.17%. But I was just wondering, was there a big promotion or something downtown? That's a significant increase.
One of those, I think, is, correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, on Maynard, for example, last year, before the North Quad was finished, there were a lot of construction vehicles parked in
Yes,
Maynard.
okay, that's
So we don't
absolutely
have
true of
that
Maynard.
anymore.
Yeah, there were a number of university construction projects going on that were using spaces in the parking structures that were not hourly spaces. They were contractual spaces during the time of that construction. So without that, more spaces for hourly patrons to come in.
So the hourly patrons for Maynard were up by 13,000, which accounts for about a third of the increase. So there must have been something else going on too. Interesting. Okay, just curious. That's a big jump. It caught my eye.
Yeah, the parking system is very dynamic, and it also there are lags in. Spaces become available. It takes a while for people to figure out there are spaces available. Particularly the campus structures are very volatile. A lot has to do with, if people feel they can drive in, they may be getting apartments outside the city that are less expensive. If they don't think they can drive in, they may take other decisions. Then again, there's a fair amount of lag time in that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what April does.
Yes.
We actually had better weather in March too. Sometimes even that will do it.
Are there other questions on the financial numbers at all? Okay, as you said, we are We have actually 3 different parking reports. The Mayor was just referring to the one in March where there was about a 7% increase in revenues and about the hourly patrons, which again, just explained about, is a significant jump. If you look at the previous ones, which are the 3-month and the 9-month, things average out a little bit more. Say if you look at the 9-month, we're up about 3% in revenues and up about 1% in hourly patrons.
That's from page 22 you're looking at.
Yes, the 9-year plan is on page, 9-month numbers are on page 22.
Great.
All right.
Okay.
Is that, or would that be it? For
That would be
your
our report
Roger?
unless there are other questions.
Okay. John, you got here just in time.
Just in time, I see Adrian's not here, so I don't have his written report, so I'll just tell you generally about what I know is going on. 5th in Division, I believe that Eastland, if they have not started work again this week, will be doing so very shortly, starting on Division. And again, I haven't been out there to see if they're out there, but they're supposed to be arriving soon if they're not already there. With the South 5th Avenue parking structure, progress as of late on phase 1, which is the east leg, walls are being poured. All of the slabs, of course, have been poured there, and they are up to surface. In phase 2, which is the middle section of the deck, they've just begun pouring slabs and are continuing to pour slabs there. And in phase 3, which is the furthest west area of the deck, it's still being excavated, still waiting for footings, etc., to be poured in that area before they start pouring slabs. SME has, I believe, finished their inspections of the earth retaining system on the north side and have moved over to the west side, and I believe also any repairs that they felt necessary have been accomplished on the north side, and then they will finish up on the west side. And I think in the next couple of weeks that process will be completed. I am hoping to schedule a tour for our next meeting, and we haven't finalized that yet, but that was in the plan. I think that the eastmost stair case will be completed at that time, so we'll have easier access in and out. But I will let everybody know the status of that as I know more. I hope to firm that up on Friday. Does anybody have any questions for me? Our next committee meeting is Thursday, and that's a change of date. May 6th at 11 a.m. and again,
26th.
Or excuse me, 26th at 11 a.m. And again, if anything changes, Roger, how much? We have no idea how much time we're going to need for the money part of this.
I think things are pretty up in the air right now. Yeah.
So, but again, you might be prepared for if we do tour the deck, you might be prepared for a longer meeting than usual. But I'll have those details later on.
Okay. And with respect to the next, that next meeting does take place, and our next board meeting will take place before the end of our fiscal year. So with regard to the resolution that Newcomb had asked about, it talks about completing discussions by the end of the fiscal year. Next, our economic development meeting, we asked Donna Sharilla from Spark back to give us more information about some more in-depth business demographics. And she did give us some really interesting information about industry cluster information and the number of jobs. It's clear that the IT sector is the most prevalent of the companies in the downtown area, making up about a third of the county's IT businesses and 15% of the county's IT employment. That's within the downtown. Downtown firms are relatively small, and these small businesses like the downtown atmosphere because sometimes it's only 2 people and 3 computers or whatever it takes for one of those smaller businesses, and the kind of the ambiance of downtown is what they are looking for. Any higher rents that there are in the downtown do not seem to be a deterrent to some of these small IT businesses. There's small amounts of life science and automotive sectors downtown also, but some of these, that's an industry that would need a larger floor plate, and that's our big issue as far as developing more business in the downtown seems to be concerned, that once firms reach a certain size, that some of them will reluctantly leave downtown because while there are lots of small spaces, there aren't very many very large spaces that are available in the downtown. We started with this feedback that we got from Donna, we started thinking about ways that the DDA and Spark can collaborate on more attraction and retention of businesses and employees and residents. So a couple of things we talked about were a roundtable discussion with IT firms to talk about space, talent, and other needs, and sharing information to help everybody's efforts. For example, downtown housing opportunities, information on various downtown amenities that would be helpful to Spark in recruiting companies. So that's kind of an ongoing project. We also talked about DDA website improvements, both as part of kind of our economic development and our communication arm. And we had a good discussion with Amber had gotten a lot of information from other cities and other DDAs and what they're doing with their web presence, and so we looked at a lot about that. And we talked about, we're not going to go to the huge time and expense of completely redesigning our website, but we did talk about kind of reorganizing some of the information there and how it might be more useful to people. And we're also going to try to enhance usability with all the interactive parking maps and things that we can do on the site. So our next economic development communication meeting is going to be Wednesday, April 20, not April. When is it going to be? May. It's going to be Wednesday, May 25th at 9 a.m. Does anybody have any questions about that committee? Okay. Next is the Partnerships Committee.
I'd like to say that Russ goes to great lengths not to have to give this report.
That's true.
All the way down to Detroit and having to serve on a jury today, but I'll do it in his place. So the energy grant program continues. I think it's remarkable that we have had an investment in businesses and buildings of over $650,000 in the downtown since we began. So that is a clear example of the mission of the DDA of leveraging a little bit of our money for the investment of an improvement of private businesses and buildings. We've got a couple of things that we're going to be working on regarding the energy grant program in the next meeting. We're going to be talking about a very small grant, if any, going forward, and to prioritize what we will do with those funds. Are we going to merely do energy audits? Are we going to merely do grants, matching grants for investments? Do we focus on some of the smaller businesses or only some of the larger businesses? So we've got to kind of sort through where our priorities are with our diminishing resources for that program. We also had an interesting discussion from David DeRita, the Roxbury Group, joined us. and just gave us his insight on the RFP process, some of the things that he's seen that has worked very well, and some of the ones that he has seen that has worked not so well. And he gave us two really great examples from the city of Detroit. But really what it boils down to is having a vision and being clear in your RFP. And he said the ones that are a little bit more obscure, kind of more like a casting a wide fishing net, tends to be the ones that don't go anywhere. But with something that articulates a community vision, a strong sense of what it is that we're looking for, those are the ones that succeed the best. And I think if we really thought about that, it's common sense. And we've seen that happen several times in Arbor. We just haven't been very clear what we wanted, and we're surprised when we don't get something that's that matches our interests when it comes back again. We also had Josie Parker from the library and Jesse Bernstein from AATA, who joined us for the discussion at the table, and they both agreed on long-term visioning, and not just kind of like what is this section of town that we are focusing on going to look like in 5 years, but maybe 30 years, and how do we start going forward and having that community-wide discussion about what that looks like. So we will continue that process, and that's next week, 9 a.m. We'll keep going forward.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks for the report. I wanted to just note that paid for by a grant program, the city has a staff member working on the PACE program. And so I believe we're probably maybe the only city in the state doing that, given that we kind of initiated the whole PACE effort. But I might suggest that you have her. She's doing a lot. Part of her mission is to engage with other groups and explain how PACE is moving along and when it's going to be ready to go and all of those things. But we have most of the pieces in place, including the funding for the stopgap that should anyone be late in making payments to the PACE program, that would be covered. So there's a lot of stuff being brought together. I'm sure she'd be happy to sit down and explain how PACE can really help with the energy savings that we're trying to achieve in the community. And it would be a huge help if the DDA could be of assistance in rolling that out in the downtown area, because the city's going to be rolling it out in citywide for commercial entities.
And actually, that's part of our dialogue as to whether or not we want to do something that is augmenting to the PACE program, because some of the smaller, it's really designed for a much bigger building and the property owner. And maybe some of the beneficiaries we've seen would be somebody like Vicky's Wash and Wear Hair, who really had a tremendous amount of savings by relamping her space, and she doesn't own it. And as for her, the matching grant was huge, and it really brought the cost down. So, maybe the role is not so much the big building. Maybe it's the smaller ones, and that's part of the dialogue. Is do we go big or do we go small?
And it's property assessed clean energy for those that are wondering. But it just might be instructional to have them come in and explain how that could work.
Very good. Anything else? Thank you. Next is Transportation Committee. John.
Thank you. We did a spring walk around at our last meeting, and this time we particular emphasis in looking at some of the outskirts areas of the DDA, in other words, areas where folks enter into the downtown. And there were really two purposes. One is to look at what could be done in the very short term with our current very limited amount of dollars available. And the other was to just look at those things that potentially in the long term could benefit our downtown if and when funds become available. So in terms of short-term items, some of the things that we looked at were on the west side of town, some of those areas where roads cross the railroad tracks. As an example, there's some pretty nasty areas there where whether it's pedestrians or bicyclists that are not safe. And so there are some areas that we looked at that we could consider upgrading the sidewalk areas in terms of drainage and the surface materials and all those things. We looked at Main Street areas of trip hazards at vaults, those sorts of things downtown. Towards Carytown, there are a few areas also that we identified for sidewalk improvements that we can put on the list. Another category of things are looking at potentially upgrades to the downtown bike sharrows. As most of you know, that program has been implemented by the city, but there are gaps and holes in it where they would love for us to step in and help to kind of fulfill the vision of what to do for the bike sharrows and so forth, and signage associated with that. The third item we looked at was looking at potential for countdown signals at other intersections. One of the ones that was interesting was up by the campus on State Street, and we had some conversation about, do countdown signals help or hurt in an environment with students? I know I'm one of the ones that sort of times my crossing, so we've had some conversation about that. And the last thing is there seemed to be a pretty good response about the plantings that had been done last year. So that's the fourth item we put on the list for at parking lots and at the structures. So the purpose then moving forward would be to look at how we can put prices to those items and what things we can fund. We can't do all, even that limited list, we can't do all of it, but we can try to target specific areas that are really primarily related to safety, in my mind, is the key thing that we want to look out for. The other thing is we walked around, we looked at things in the longer term, the bigger picture, and some of those things may be areas up at Carytown is an interesting area. What could happen in that area? There's obviously the long-term vision of the plan up by Carytown, but also maybe in the shorter term, even we identified some areas that are sort of peculiar in terms of pedestrian flow and safety and the way things are positioned and all that. Maybe something could be looked at there. We looked at along Huron Street. There are quite a few areas where there may be some pedestrian improvements that could be done. We had a little conversation about the notion of pocket parks in the long run and what role they may play in the long term. So it was worthwhile to get out and around and sort of have a chance to sort of get a few people's sort of view of the downtown as you're wandering. So that's in a nutshell what we did. Our next meeting will be to refine this stuff and really try to nail down exactly what projects we're going to do right now this year with what's been budgeted. And we'll also have updates on the AETA's countywide plan, Get Downtown, where we are with Get Downtown, and that next meeting will be Wednesday, May 11th at 11 a.m. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes.
I was just going to add one thing. And I apologize for not remembering the name of the organization, but I think it's a pretty prestigious organization. As you remember, a few years ago, the city was given an award for being the third best place to walk in the United States, and that was affirmed recently. There was one platinum, and that wasn't us, but we were one of 3 cities to receive the gold. As one of the best places to walk in the downtown certainly shares in helping to make that happen. And as it turns out, Ann Arbor, we have a tremendous percentage compared to other places of people who are walking to work and getting to their destination that way. So that'll be announced at council tonight. The press release went out last week, but I didn't see any of the press resources pick it up yet. So we'll at least make sure that folks who are watching CTN are aware of it.
Very good. Good to know. Any other questions? Are there any other DDA business matters that anyone would like to raise? Don't see any. Other audience participation. Is there anyone who may not have been here at the beginning who would like to address us for 4 minutes? Don't see anyone. Is there a move to adjourn?
Support.
Yes, support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
This may be a record.
I believe it is.
I don't know. I've broken my own record. I think it was 48.
Did you start late?